Coming back to your inner circle, because you think I've forgotten, Anita. I like how you deflected there. What is the criteria for your inner circle?
Oh my gosh, you are funny, you know. I wouldn't say there's a specific criteria. I mean, like I said, obviously in social work, we assess people for a living.
Yeah.
And there's nobody in this life that doesn't have baggage. All of us do.
Yeah.
All of us have behaviors that can be a bit toxic at times. I think I'm good with people who are willing to work on themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have enough self-awareness to acknowledge what's going on for you and you're doing the work on yourself, we can roll.
Okay.
But there are people who lack self-awareness. There's stuff going on for them and they project onto you. So people who just have really toxic behaviors.
Okay.
Like you talk to somebody, you come away feeling heavy. I ain't supposed to be feeling like that.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, there are times where in my coaching journey, I'm supporting people and the first couple of sessions feel like that because so much is coming up for people. And I know I'm going to have to go and decompress when I'm done. But as the sessions go along, it gets nicer and nicer and easier because you're helping somebody toward that journey. But again, that's the difference between, like, say, a coaching relationship versus a personal relationship. I ain't got time to be coaching my friends all the time. And if we're friends and it feels like it's labor and every day I'm coaching you, I ain't got time.
Is it a friendship?
Yeah.
And I would question that friendship. Is it because you want to get something out of me that you are with me? Yeah. I would question that friendship.
Definitely. And that kind of makes me think about our relationships in the workplace. So we've kind of delved into about personal relationships. And we mentioned about boundaries. So just want to get a sense of how do you maintain relationships in the workplace? Right, and I'll come to Rose for this one.
Oh, I think it's open communication.
Okay.
Communication is key in relationships. And it's about, when I say open communications, it's about having both difficult conversations. Yeah. And how do we manage those difficult conversations? Being able to be open and transparent.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's about if you don't like something, being open and telling them, but in a manner that is
Respectful.
not negative. Yeah. And I think with me, I don't like conflict.
Yes.
I do not like conflict. Yeah. But it's about how do I have those conversations in a manner that is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
It's not going to be taken as negative.
Yeah. And how do you have those conversations? To
Oh
ensure that.
my goodness, that is difficult. It depends on the situation and the circumstances, and also thinking about how is it going to be received and preparing for that conversation.
Yeah.
And also knowing the person, you will know the person, they're not going to be at their best if I approach them in this manner. So knowing the person would inform how you are going to have those difficult conversations and preparing them for it as well.
Right. So in terms of professional relationships, I think we said earlier about boundary setting.
Yeah.
And recognizing that in the workplace, yes, there are people that you'll form relationships with. But it's thinking about your professional self, your conduct, how you're going to carry yourself in the workplace. Because, it's upholding the values of the profession and ensuring that, you're just carrying yourself in a way that's respectful. And I think I said earlier about the boundaries.
Yeah.
And just knowing what is work and what is not work, and how to just keep yourself within that.
Yeah, I think it's important to not lose being willing to work on yourself, like you said earlier on, Anita, and knowing that. So I feel for me, my examples would be in the workplace. I do recognize that I am slightly different to how I would be in my personal relationships. And certain things that I can get away with saying in my personal relationships, I wouldn't dream of saying it in the workplace. Like, imagine the way I talk to some of my friends now speaking to my manager with the same kind of slang or lingo, and you learn about professionalism and how to kind of, they talk about code switching, but I think it's kind of like relationship switching. So like certain relationships, I might act a certain way with like managers and so forth. And in my colleagues, I'm in a particular, act in a particular way. And then my colleagues that are friends, then I'll have another way. And it's not about me losing my sense of self, because that's not what I see it as. It's just making sure that I come across in the right context.
And I think it's also getting to know people.
Yeah.
Getting to know people, because for me, I would know how to communicate with you because I know how you will respond. So it's getting to know people. How do I communicate with them? And how is my approach? How are they going to take my approach? And having to change that. Yeah, if I know someone is sensitive, then I'm going to be sensitive in how I communicate with them.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things for me that I've learned over the years that helps relationship is having self-awareness and emotional intelligence. And what I mean by self-awareness, it's knowing how you're coming across.
Okay, yeah.
So there are times when we might be communicating with somebody and you think you're coming across a certain way, or you think you're trying to convey one message, but your body language and everything else is communicating something else.
Yes.
Or that lack of self-awareness means I'm talking to you, I'm angry with you, I'm not telling you that I'm angry with you, but there's a way in which I'm communicating and my body language says it.
Yeah.
And I think if you're somebody that's quite emotionally attuned, you can pick up on other people's emotions. So I've had people talk to me and the words sound okay, but I can pick up what's behind it.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you call it, an energy or a spirit? I can pick up what's behind it. And I'm thinking, you need to check yourself. Because what you think you're putting across is not what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You know? And I think it's having that self-awareness. And I think self-awareness we can build through feedback.
Yes.
I mean, I grew up in a family of 8. I get told about myself all the time. So I think through that, you develop an awareness of who you are around what works for you. And I think being open to feedback really does help in terms of helping you to identify who you are, what makes you tick.
Yeah.
Like, do you know when you're becoming angry?
Yeah.
Do you know when you're upset? Because sometimes we push everything to the back or sweep it under the rug. Kind of similar to what we spoke about earlier. We spoke about conflict resolution, pretending it never happened. But it happened, though. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. And also choosing the method of communication helps as well. Because for me, at times, it's not very helpful, for instance, if you're angry and upset, to send off an email because you don't know what you are going to write in that email. So it's about pausing and thinking, how best do I communicate this? How best do I write this? Or do I need to have a face-to-face communication?
Yeah.
And often I find that is a lot more helpful than, because I've got to be mindful of my tone.
Yes.
I've got to be mindful of lots of things. And I may not be able to through an email or in writing. Yeah.
It's funny you said that. You both made two valid points. I'll come to your point first, Rose, about the level of communication and sending emails. And I actually spoke to someone before and they talked about what they would usually do is when they get that snarky email that they don't like, they would respond in a different colour. And then they would come back and revisit it later because they know if they send it on, like, literally on red, they know that they're going to respond and it's not going to come across in a professional way. And I think what helps for me is when I get those emails, because we all get those emails sometimes where your accountability is questioned or just you in general as a professional has been questioned. I tend to call upon my colleagues sometimes and I'd say, okay, does this come across a bit harsh? Because obviously I'm acting on emotion right now. And I feel like I have that relationship with my colleagues to then say, actually, just have a look at this. How does it read? Is it okay? And they might say, actually, you know what? Take that word out or maybe replace that word. It's a bit harsh with something else. So I think that was a valid point, Rose. And then coming back to your point, Anita, about feedback. I've actually got a really good quote here, which is, don't take criticism from people you would never go to for advice. And when you were talking about feedback, it made me think there's a lot of times where we may receive criticism from individuals And words are powerful.
Yes.
And especially we think about it. I could sit here and give you guys individually 100 pieces of positive feedback. I say one thing that you perceive as negative, and for some reason the brain, the way we process, will fixate on that.
Yes.
And I thought, when I
Yes.
read that quote, I thought, you know what? There's so many people that are quick to criticize, but would I necessarily take advice from them?
But there's this thing in social work they call the feedback sandwich.
Yes.
Where you start out with a positive.
Yeah.
You give the criticism, and then you also finish off with a positive as well.
Yes.
And I think as we sit here talking about communication, it's one of the fundamental pillars of relationships. A lot of relationships break down because of communication.
100%.
Because people don't know how to communicate well, or they say things in a way that damages relationships.
Yes.
And I think I'm quite a frank person.
Yes, you are.
And sometimes, there have been times when I've said things and it's not gone over the best way.
Okay.
And over time, I've learned how to balance that with being tactful and diplomatic. And I often think, okay, well, how am I going to say this in a way that people can hear? But there are times that no matter how you say it, you're going to have to say it.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you say, people will struggle. But I think, it's that whole thing about speaking each other's language and knowing what works for people, but also the timing of communication. Because there are times when I want to say something right now, but I can tell the other person isn't ready to receive it.
Yeah.
And then I just have to leave it alone.
I think how you say it really matters. And thinking about how you say it matters.
How you say what you say.
Yes.
Sometimes
how
I
you
think
say
it needs
what
to
you
be
say.
said,
It's
though.
true.
It needs to be
Yes.
said, and I feel sometimes we can be a bit hesitant to say what's really important because we're fearful about how that might be received. So definitely coming back to your point, Rose, how you say it does matter, but I think it should be said. So, Naya,
No,
your face. I'm intrigued.
I was just saying. Do you know what? I think I've gotten into trouble so much over my mouth
Okay.
growing up with older siblings. Why are you laughing, Rose? Growing up with older siblings, parents, and I remember being a child. And if my younger sister's watching it, she'll be sat there laughing. But so many times I would get into trouble because of my mouth.
Okay.
Because I was very frank. And more often than not, if it comes up here, it would come out through here. And because I got into trouble so much, a lot of the times I was taught not everything needs to be said. Why was I so frank? Because I'm honest. I value honesty. And I think the people that I get on with the most are people that I can be honest with. We put it all on the table. There's no frills, no frowns. I know what you think. You know what I think. We know where we stand. As opposed to sometimes people are carrying things that they're upset about and annoyed about. They're not telling you, but it's showing in their behavior. I had a lecturer who used to say it straight or show it crooked. And you're not saying it, but it's in your body language. You're moving kind of funny.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, can you just tell me what's going on, please? Because I can't read your mind.
And I think that holds people back. You can't progress. You can't. At times, though it may be a painful process, it's just like refining gold. It can be quite a painful process, and at times you need to go through that.
I'm going to come back to your point, Anita, and I kind of politely disagree with that.
Which one? Which one you disagree
Not
with?
everything that's in here should be said.
Okay.
No,
I think
no.
it's how it's said.
Yeah.
So if, for example, there's something that you're thinking and it can benefit the person, you can still say it, but it's how it comes across.
I think, and when I say not everything needs to be said, like I said to you, I'm frank, I'm
Yes.
outspoken,
Yeah.
I speak my mind. And maybe I've learned the hard way
Right.
that there are people who don't want to hear.
Okay.
They do not want your opinion. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I may think I'm going to say this to you because it's going to help me. It's going to help you. But is it my job to help you? If you don't want to be helped, why is that my business? And I don't mean it to sound rude. What I mean is people have to be ready, though. Because there's some people that you can talk until the cows come home. If they
Yes.
choose to not change, They're going to stay. And there were times when I would say it because I need to get it off my chest. So then I have to question, am I just communicating this to you because I need to get it off my chest? Or I have to question, what is the motive of my communication? Am I saying this to you because I genuinely think this is going to help you, so I'm going to say it? But even when you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is something that you need to say because it's going to help the other person, sometimes people are not willing to receive it. And you become the villain. And you create enemies for yourself, and you're wasting your breath because they don't want to hear. And so you just have to respectfully leave them alone.
I think it depends on the context, because when you made that comment, I was thinking more in the workplace. So, for example, if I'm a new learner or I need some of that guidance and direction, 100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
And sometimes for example, it's going to be a very random example, but if I'm going to the bathroom and say if I've stepped on tissue, for example, I need to be told, even if it's a stranger, or I just feel like it's important that you don't let that person walk around with the tissue on their foot.
Yes.
So that's when you said that point, I was thinking context is very key.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there's times where you may feel like, is it benefiting them or is it benefiting me?
Yeah.
And also, I think our characteristics are similar but different. So where you're quite frank, I feel like I glaze over things and I'll try and find a way to go around the houses to make sure, oh, by the way, you know, you got your shoes are really nice, but you've got tissue at the bottom. Rather than just saying, hello, there's tissue stuck at the bottom of your shoe.
But what about when people don't want to be told? What do you do if people just don't want feedback? And I know the tissue is an analogy, but I'm saying to you that there are people that I've worked with, supported, coached, mentored, supervised, that they're just not ready to hear that feedback. They're not ready to change.
Is it about then waiting for them to be in a position that they are able and being able to make that judgment, that assessment that they are not ready now, but knowing when to have that communication?
Yeah.
Possibly.
And that's what I mean. In every relationship, I think I read something once that, or it might have been some kind of cartoon I watched, where it said, you know, you might be in a place where you want to tell your friend the truth, but they're not yet ready to receive what you have to say.
Okay, that's deep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you can plant a seed. That's all you can do. They always say, don't underestimate the importance of planting a seed, because that person might not be willing to change. But even in my relationships with people that I'm coaching, somebody might come for their first session. And in that first session, I'm seeing a lot. I'm seeing like 10, 20 different things. But I have to go at a pace.
Yeah.
And I have to think, is this person ready?
Okay.
And I might tackle issues one at a time. And there are times when I raise a particular issue and I see people clench up. I see the body language. And there are times when I think it's safe to push through. This is making you uncomfortable, but I'm going to go there. And sometimes I even ask permission. I'll say, I noticed so-and-so. Are you okay for me to talk about this now?
Yes.
But there are other times, based on the body language or the kind of distress that you see on people's faces when you mention something, I think, okay, you're not ready. And so I need to leave this alone and either do a bit more work with you to get you to the place where you're ready to have that conversation, as well as sometimes I just need to recognize that I ain't God.
But you know what? You made a valid point, Anita, that permission seeking. Remember, we're all human. We all have emotions. And what you may be stronger in certain areas, you may be more resilient, doesn't necessarily mean that that individual is the same. And that's why I think it's so important to check in. So even like, I'm always open to receiving feedback. So I give that permission to provide me feedback.
Yeah.
And then a question may be around of, how do you feel about receiving feedback?
Yeah.
How would I know if it's something that becomes a bit distressing for you, or when you want me to probe? The difference between probing, the difference between a pause could be you just need that space to think. And it's about having those, like you said, uncomfortable conversations, starting from the get-go, setting those expectations and boundaries, and then from that, working on it and moving forward.
And also understanding people's pace and going at their pace. Yeah. Because if you choose to go at your own pace and they are not ready, then it's all going to fall apart. So understanding their pace as well and going at their pace.
Yeah, and like you said, it's we have to be emotionally attuned and intelligent, even in our coaching relationships with people. I have to be emotionally attuned to be able to pick up what's going on for somebody.
Yes.
Because you can be dragging somebody through a process that they're not ready for.
Yeah.
Or trying to have conversations. And there are times when I've had to say to myself, Anita, you didn't come here to fix everybody. You can't fix everybody.
Yeah.
And there are things, like I said, there are people in my sphere of influence that I might see this and this is going on for them. I can pick up what it is. I know what it's about. And I could address it, but I know they're not ready. And I'm going to leave you alone, love. Maybe somebody else will come along and tell you. Or maybe life and experience, sometimes it's painful experiences.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, sometimes you want to rescue people.
Yeah.
Because you can see how that particular thing is going to turn out. You can see how they might trip and fall over on the tissue. And as well, sometimes people are just not in the frame of mind.
Absolutely.
They have a lot going on for them and they just don't want to hear. And last thing I'm going to say is like my sister, I was talking to her recently about this whole thing about giving feedback. And she said, think about how some people grew up. Did they grow up in an environment where it was safe to be open and honest about how they feel? Did they grow up in an environment where they were encouraged to have uncomfortable or difficult conversations? Was it frowned upon? Were they punished? And so you're trying to have difficult conversations with people when they grew up in an environment where it wasn't safe to have difficult conversations.
And how about thinking about, am I the right person to be having this conversation?
That's true.
Could I signpost them to someone who I know would do a better job?
Yeah.
Or someone that they would be more receptive to receiving this? And at times, I think it helps to think, am I the right person to do it?
Yeah.
And not everything is within our control.
Yeah.
No.
And I think, like you're talking about, you can't save everybody.
No.
Not everybody wants to be saved. There's
No.
another aspect of that.
No.
But most importantly, we cannot be in control. And I think that's also when you're in your coaching stance, you're starting to learn about your coaching styles
Yeah.
and a bit about yourself within that as well.
Yeah.
And I'm also having coaching at the moment. And the more and more I'm being like picked at, I'm realizing I've got a bit of a controlling nature.
Tell us
Surprising.
about it. Come on, tell me more.
Very surprising. I mean, can you believe that? Like, but it's just about, I feel like I've been called a taskmaster by someone before in
I
this
wonder
room.
who that is.
In this room. And the more and more you start to have a mirror put in front of you, you start to realize that I've started to realize more about myself. And it also kind of mirrors into the relationships that I have, whether it's in my personal life, whether it's in my professional life. So I do feel like, that's some learning.
I think that takes us back to self-awareness.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Self-awareness, emotional intelligence, being comfortable having difficult conversations, being comfortable with difficulty, but at the same time knowing I am not God and it's not my job to fix everybody. That's something I've had to come to terms with. It is not my job to fix everyone. And although I want to go around straighten out people, and I think I can help you, and I give you this feedback, it's going to help you.
Yeah.
Some people are not ready to be helped.
Yeah.
If you're supervising somebody, you have to find a way to give the feedback.
Yes.
If you're supervising or assessing somebody and it's important to their development, or for example, it's important to whether or not they're going to pass this program, you have to provide the feedback. But outside of those relationships where you have a professional obligation, if it's a friend, a mentee, whatever, and they don't want to hear, let them steer.
And then on the reverse of that is sometimes people can expect more. When you give so much of yourself to them, the expectation is it's the norm. And I've actually been stung by that, where I felt like I gave a lot in a particular relationship, and when I couldn't do something to the best of my ability, I did a bit of it, but I couldn't do it to the best of my ability. Unfortunately, that individual did not see that side of it, and I was the baddie in that situation. And I just feel like, once again, self-awareness, but I do feel like it's about setting those boundaries and sticking to those boundaries.
Yeah. And I think we can overinvest.
Absolutely.
What you're talking about is overinvesting, because sometimes we overinvest and we set people up so they have this expectation of us.
Yeah.
And then when we're not able to meet those expectations, they become resentful.
Yes.
So how do we start off how we're meant to finish, or how you mean to go along?
Yeah.
So balancing how much you give. And sometimes you can come out of some relationship thinking, I gave too much.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do give too much. And so we don't get to a place where we don't give anymore. You give, but you make an assessment of, is this person capable of receiving what I'm giving? And how do I make sure that I'm not setting myself up by overextending so the person becomes overly reliant?
Yeah.
And that brings us back to self-care. The importance of self-care.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I feel like we're coming to the end of our topic of maintaining healthy relationships. Very, very insightful conversations and definitely food for thought. It'll be helpful for our listeners to also provide any comments, any reflections, or even any thoughts about what's been discussed today. What's your experiences of self-care, maintaining healthy and unhealthy relationships, and just in general? Always helpful to receive the feedback. And most importantly, please like, comment, follow, and subscribe. Any last comments before we end out?
No, look after yourself.
Yes.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Hey, it's like a
I
song,
like
isn't
that.
it?
I like that.
Definitely.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's a good one.
Well, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you at Arc Logos in our next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.